Welcome, guys, back to the I Love Wrestling podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Woolwine, and today we're welcomed with Wolfgang. How we doing, man?
How you doing? Nice to see you. Thank you very
Nice,
much for having me on.
of course. I'll admit I saw you on the Soul Sessions podcast, and I was like, shoot, I might as well shoot the shot and see if he wants to come over here. And so, thank you for accepting the invitation.
No, honestly, I appreciate you having me on. It's good to get guys like you that are providing a platform for us to vent a little bit and just kind of tell them like how much not for like I was just complimenting you earlier on the name of the podcast, and I think there's a portion of us that still do this job that do love professional wrestling, and that's why we're involved with it. It's not like it's a secondary choice or we were second best at something else and we fell into this. Like, this is all I've ever wanted to do since I was a little kid, and I still love professional wrestling as much as I did then, if not more now, because I've got to experience so much in it, and it's not something I think you ever truly fall out in love with. I think we all kind of get it in our hearts from an early age, and it's either always in there and kept down, and you're not allowed to like it because it's not cool. And you go to like you start to grow up and people get into other things. But I think everyone has got that love of professional wrestling. Will they admit that they're wrestling fans right now, or if you put them in front of a live show, they'll soon become lovers of pro wrestling. So thank you very much for having me on, man. It's good to have this platform.
Of course. I'm gonna take a second to put you over. I'll be honest. Before NXT UK, the United Kingdom tournament, I had no clue who Wolfgang was. But I mean,
Yeah,
the first match he was in immediately. I remember telling my dad, I was like 15, 16 at the time. I was like, I don't know if it's the name, the intensity, what about it? But as soon as like that tournament was over, all I did was go through and try to find as many matches of yours and Pete Dunne's as I possibly could. So just thank you for entertaining me, I guess, for the last decade of my life.
yeah, that's cool. That's cool to hear, man. Because as you say, like no one had really heard overseas who Wolfgang and Pete Dunne had started to make a bit of a name for himself, along with Trent Seven, Mark Andrews, Tyler Bate. Like there's a few of them that started to create a bit of a noise. And to be honest, back in the UK, it was like the best kept secret in professional wrestling. The people that would fly over to wrestle for us through the years, like I started in 2002 was my first training session. I did a battle royal at the end of that year, and my first match was in January 2003. So February 2003. So at that point, there was no road to the WWE. We were training on judo mats like this thick, getting slammed onto them, and at this point, we're thinking we just want to be involved. Like, how on earth anyone can go from here to getting to the WWE was so far beyond anyone's like reasonable thought. But um, from there, over the years, we built it from like an audience of 30 people to genuinely 6,500 for an independent show, which was the biggest draw in European history for like 30 years since the glory days of Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks and all the guys that were on World of Sport that made wrestling popular in Britain at the time. There had never been an independent show that could draw anywhere near 6,500, and we did it with a little bit of help from some outsiders. Like the main event of that show was my Gallus brother Joe Coffey against Kurt Angle in one of the best matches in the history of ICW. I was in a steel cage match defending the ICW world title against Trent Seven, who I would go on to have countless battles with, and I'm looking forward to sparking that back up again. But the independent scene in Britain. was alive and well and thriving well before the WWE decided to make a UK tournament.
Hmm.
The WWE seen that there was such a buzz going on over in the UK, Scotland, England, Ireland, and Wales, and had to take advantage of it. Like, if you don't know, earlier on I was talking about the glory days of British wrestling. That ITV, it's one of the channels over here, they took advantage of how popular pro wrestling was in Britain again, without needing American stars. And they decided to bring back pro wrestling for the first time in like 30 years since it was cancelled in television, the 70s or whatever it was, 80s. So they created World of Sport, which included guys like Mark Coffey, Joe Coffey. I don't want to leave anyone out, but a lot of the faces that you would see working in the NXT UK brand and beyond were all doing very well before the WWE decided to make this tournament. So, if you went back and looked after that tournament, any one of those guys on that card had like a history of great matches through the years, and WWE were very good to us by shining a light on what was already a buzzing and thriving scene, which I think it still is. Like, the talent's still there, the audience is still there, and it's still one of the best places to go if you're a professional wrestler to spend any time. I'm just lucky enough that I was brought up in a time where some of the best to ever do it were coming through, and some of the biggest WWE stars. Like, I was my first day of training, Drew McIntyre was there, and I would go on to meet Noam Dar and Alba Fire, Piper Niven, Isla Dawn, and Nikki. Like, for such a small country, there's only 5 million people in Scotland. And for such a small country, it's incredible that there's been so many top pro wrestlers to come out of it. So yeah, like, as much as the WWE did for us by shining a light and creating the UK tournament and ultimately NXT UK, the talent was already there. They just gave it a platform, a bigger platform.
Definitely, definitely. Um, usually here on the podcast, I'll try to start at the beginning of your story. And I mean, we talk about our love for professional wrestling. It all starts usually like when you're a kid, so or in your adolescence, somewhere in there. So when did you find pro wrestling?
I can't remember a time where I didn't enjoy pro wrestling and want to watch it all the time. Since I was a toddler. So my mum would tell a story about me sitting in front of the television at 3 years old watching guys like Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, Jake the Snake, and Hulk Hogan, all these kind of the golden years guys. And that I was born in '86. We had, do you remember VHS?
Yeah.
So before DVDs, there was VHS, and the only video that I had was Royal Rumble 1991.
Okay.
And I watched it over and over and over, and it was Hulk Hogan winning the Royal Rumble. And it's probably why I love that type of match so much. And if I'm, let's say, 5 years old at this point, um, these guys that I was watching on the television, like Roddy Piper and Yokozuna, like all these guys that were just larger than life cartoon characters. And at the time, Hogan had his own cartoon show on television filled with all these wrestlers playing the characters too. So that was, from a very young age, was like these were my superheroes. Um, you kind of dream of being a professional wrestler at that age, but in reality, it's probably not on the cards for you. You have to get a normal job. You have to do something that's a lot more realistic. Um, but it wasn't until maybe like 97, 98 when the Attitude Era was kicking off. and Shawn Michaels was the world champ. We just got satellite television, like Sky Television, you called it back in the day. It was the pay-per-views would be on Sky Box Office. So all through those years between 91 and 97, say, I'd only ever seen a couple of VHSs. I'd never got to see any sort of current pro wrestling. Like I missed all the NWO stuff. I had to go back and watch all that because I only watched WWF. And when we got satellite, the first thing I turned on, it was like Ken Shamrock beating up the entire nation of domination, hitting them with suplexes and going crazy. And I thought this was different from the 1991 video that I'd been watching. This was exciting and new and just wild. So I'd say that I originally got my love for professional wrestling at a very young age, 2, 3 years old, but I didn't know that I wanted to be a professional wrestler, like seriously, until I seen like Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold and WrestleMania 14. Really is what kind of that's the heyday of me being like a proper pro wrestling fan, where I'm 100% in from those years, 98, 99 through to 2002, when I started training at 15, 16 years old. So I'd say the guy that made me want to be a pro wrestler was Shawn Michaels, but it was definitely that attitude era that made me want to. It was also the kind of Jackass era. Like I grew up when Jackass was just coming on television and
Yeah.
CKY. So me and my friends just used to throw each other into bushes and jump off things and do things that all the warnings at the start of the show would tell us not to do. Um, we used to wrestle at our back garden. There's so many pro wrestlers nowadays who started by just throwing their mum's sofa cushions onto the floor and suplexing their brothers and cousins. Um, so yeah, I don't remember a time in my life where I didn't want to do or be involved in professional wrestling, especially to be a professional wrestler and work for the WWE. Like, I've been very fortunate to do that for the last 8 years. And it's something that when I was growing up was just never on the cards. So I'm happy with that.
What made you decide to actually like seek a school, find a school, and start training?
Again, I wanted to be involved with it in any way possible. And if there was a school available to me, a wrestling school, I would have been there. And as soon as I found one, I was there the very next week. I was, my dad was always very supportive, and he still is. It's like whatever sport I wanted to do, I always wanted to be a professional wrestler, but I was never into football. I was never into soccer, like as much as the typical Glaswegian is. But I always wanted to do, I guess, American sports because I'd watched the Sandlot Kids movie and I wanted to be a baseball player. So my dad found a baseball team for me to go practice with. I'd watched Space Jam and I wanted to play basketball. So my dad found a basketball team that I could go play with. Um, but it was always professional wrestling. There just wasn't ever a professional wrestling school to go to. So I started amateur wrestling, the kind of Olympic stuff, the
Hmm.
Greco-Roman, like Scott, just it was my dad's logic that if you want to be a professional wrestler, you have to begin as an amateur and then work your way up to being a professional, which sounded logical. So I went to the amateur wrestling for a while, maybe 6 months to a year, and it instilled a lot of good grappling knowledge in me that I still take with me to this day. Not necessarily like holds and movements, but just manipulate your way around a match and like controlling your opponent, that kind of thing. Um, Fast forward a few into amateur, and my dad, who used to work on a building site, came home with a newspaper that was advertising Jake the Snake Roberts was coming to a local wrestling school. And this was the first time that I'd heard that there was any such thing. And it just so happened that it hadn't been opened for very long, maybe a few months. And then I heard that Jake the Snake was going to be visiting this pro wrestling school. It was advertised in the local newspaper. There was a phone number or an email, I think. I contacted the email to try and get the details of the wrestling school. And Jake the Snake's assistant got back to me, got my phone number, and one night they gave me a call and says, "Hi there, I've got Jake on the line. He wants to talk to you." And I was like 14, 15 years old. I'd watched this guy was on the VHS videos that I used to watch growing up. I idolized Jake the Snake Roberts. He was one of the coolest guys walking the planet. And he's got such a distinctive voice that when he came onto the phone, I knew it was him immediately. And he just kind of encouraged me to like keep following pro wrestling. He told me about the wrestling school that he had just visited because they trained on a Sunday and he must have called me like on the Monday or something. And that following Sunday, I was at the training school. Jake wasn't there. He was just doing a tour. He was
Hmm.
passing by, and but I showed up at the school and there was nothing. It was a post office in East Kilbride that had a kind of recreation room for the workers, and they had judo mats like this thick, and they were dense things. Like there was no give to them. Um, the room was filled with guys about my age and Drew McIntyre. We knew Drew Galloway was there, and a bunch of other guys from Scotland. Mark Dallas was there, who eventually go on to create ICW, which was the biggest independent promotion in the world, as far as I'm concerned, at one point. Um, Guys like Red Lightning, Rudo, and not many would last too long, and more would join us along the way. But I was in the right place, especially because Big Drew was there, and even back then he looked like something off a shortbread tin. He looked like this chiseled Adonis of a Scottish warrior, and he was teaching me the kind of right way to do things in professional wrestling and how to everything from the ground up. Drew McIntyre was there to kind of keep me right and guide me along the way. He was always a few steps in front of us, um, but I knew I was in the right place. So it wasn't an issue of what kind of gave me the idea to start professional wrestling training. It was just it wasn't available to me until I found it, kind of thing. So the first chance I got, I was there. I wasn't at this point like if any road was going to lead me to being a professional wrestler and potentially working for the WWE, it was this one. But when we got there, like it was very, as I said, there was no ring to train on. The first time we got a ring was like months and months later when we went down south to a different promotion.
Yeah.
So there was no real direction or road to the WWE back then. It wasn't until 2006 or 7 when Drew got signed that anyone from my country had ever worked for the WWE. Like Roddy Piper was Canadian, the Highlanders, I don't know where they came from, but I don't think they were born in Scotland. If they were, I apologise. Sorry, Rudy. Um, but yeah, so it wasn't like one thing that made me go, I want to be a professional wrestler. I'm going to start training. It was just the moment I knew there was a wrestling school near me, I went and made sure I was there every single week.
Okay. And you mentioned starting in one promotion, then moving to another. Was that other one, was that BCW or British Championship Wrestling?
It was British Championship Wrestling that I started
Okay.
training with,
Okay.
who are still they're still running. today. They're still running in the same venue that I had my first match in, or my first matches in East Kilbride and Kilmarnock. It's Charles Borrington's doing a great job by keeping that running. They sell out every venue they go to, and it's always a great buzz. So I was actually thinking about them the other day because it would be good to go back there and have another. I hear one of the buildings are getting torn down, the
Mhm.
British Championship Wrestling run in East Kilbride. So it would be good to go back there one last time because I've been wrestling in there since I was a teenager. So it'd be good to go back there and do that again. I'd always worked for British Championship Wrestling up until I was contracted to the WWE. So that was from 2003 until 2017. And I think
Okay.
I did the odd match for them while I was under contract to the WWE. When I started, there was only two options for where you could train, um, which I didn't find out until I started with one of them. BCW, British Championship Wrestling, or the Scottish Wrestling Alliance, which is where Mark Coffey and Joe Coffey, BT Gunn, would all come from. Um, so that was the only two options in the beginning. And to be honest, not to toot my own horn here, but when we started, it was an us versus them mentality. And if you work for them, you can't work for us. And I always thought there was something wrong with that. And me and my tag partner at the time were the first ones to really get involved with the other promotion. So we were WWE jumping ship to WCW. We were BCW going over to SWA. We were sitting in the crowd during one of the tag matches, which I'm sure the huge Scottish television star Grado, he was in that match, and we jumped the guardrail and started beating into them. And that was the first time that there was ever sort of any crossover between these two rival promotions. And that started up a good kind of working relationship. Ultimately, there would be more promotions that would arrive on the scene. PBW, one of them, very good. Um, family promotion, still running today. ICW, ultimately, which became this mad global phenomenon and would take us all on a ride that we'd never expect. So there's always been a scattering of small independent promotions who are drawing between like 500 and 1,000 people every week, any given area in Scotland. And it wasn't necessarily about doing one or the other, which I think benefits the entire scene. Whenever you're working together, it benefits the wrestlers and it benefits the promotion, and ultimately the fans don't have to decide between one or the other. They can just enjoy pro wrestling for what it is.
You know, you've talked about like the plethora of talent that's came out of Scotland and the surrounding area. Was it tough for you to stand out in that independent scene throughout the early 2000s?
No, it wasn't hard to stand out, to be honest. There was a lot of talented people, but at this point, we were all just one big team trying to grow the scene. And maybe people had their individual agendas by trying to kind of elevate themselves, but it was all, to be honest, a bunch of friends all helping each other and teaching each other what they had been learning and um, just trying to make everything better for everyone. Uh, I'm lucky that I grew up watching this, so I sort of picked it all up before, like subconsciously, before even stepping anywhere near a wrestling ring. And I was just naturally gifted at the athletic side of it. So I've always enjoyed throwing myself off the top rope. Rob Van Dam, Jeff Hardy were big influences on me in my early years in training. So, but I've also being a big fan of the Big Show and the Undertaker. So I try to kind of blend the two, but then I like the aggressive guys too that just go in and beat like Fit Finlay, going in and battering people. I'm trying to like it's hard to define what I can do. I'm trying to blend it all into one, but having the um sorry, what was I talking about?
You're okay.
All working together. And yeah, so it was easy to stand out for me just because I was naturally gifted at it. I was in an environment where everyone was trying to help each other, no one was trying to outdo each other, and everyone wanted each other to succeed. Um, I always just enjoyed it. If you go back and watch a Vice documentary on YouTube, Wrestlers, it may be called, and this was the first talk about the British wrestler, it was called. And that was the first light that was really shown on Scottish pro wrestling at the time. ICW was just kicking off, Gradomania was just kicking off, and Vice done a documentary on us. And one of my mates, Jack Jester, messaged me the other week saying that he'd just watched it for the first time in a long time. And there's a section in it where I'm being interviewed and I'm in my family pub. We used to run a bar in Denniston in Glasgow. Um, I'm in the pub and I'm saying I'm just enjoying pro wrestling. I've got no aspirations of going to the WWE. This was in like maybe 2004, 12, maybe.
Okay.
Um, and again, at this point, the only guy to ever do it for the WWE is Drew McIntyre. And we just thought they've got their guy. We don't need to go there. Um, one of my one of my best mates in pro wrestling, just real life, says to me when Drew McIntyre got signed by the WWE, Rudo Red Lightning says to me, "We don't need to go to America. America's going to come here. The WWE are going to come to us." And this was in 2006 or seven,
So he
and then it
predicted it.
wasn't until 10 years later the WWE make a UK tournament because we had been selling out nightclubs and venues like for 1,000 seaters, 4,000 seaters, and the biggest we ever did was close to 7,000 in the Hydro in Glasgow. So he was right. Like we at the time, I didn't have any aspirations to go to the WWE just because I was enjoying what I was doing. I was with my best friends, doing what we love, putting on great shows for some of the best fans in the world, just so enthusiastic and up for everything. Like it felt like our own attitude era where everyone was over. Everyone knew what everyone was doing on the show, and it was just a great time. So yeah, it was just if I could go back and watch that Vice documentary, and that'll then put you on to the BBC documentaries Fight Club, and that kind of documented the rise of ICW and Scottish wrestling and British wrestling as a whole from 2012. Vice documentary on YouTube, The British
Okay.
Wrestler.
I'll look it up. I definitely have to check that out. I do want to say something that I found very interesting about that is like I've talked to a plethora of independent athletes, especially in the American scene, and you always hear about how difficult it is because maybe the politics or people don't like to work together or egos or whatever. So to hear a group of guys and girls working together to just make a product as good as possible, it's a nice change of pace, especially in this world of wrestling.
Yeah, like the podcast is I Love Pro Wrestling, and that was ultimately why we were all doing it. There was no road to the WWE. There was no road to fortunes or fame. It was just a good team of guys and girls all working hard together and making each other look good, which transferred over into the audience. And it was, yeah, if you could bottle it and sell it, you'd be a millionaire. It was a great feeling to be involved with. And I think that's true throughout a lot of the British scene. There's a lot of independent promotions that they are all there. They've got their own team of incredibly talented people, and they're all working together to make each other a success. There's no individuals. And to be honest, if there is an individual, for example, Drew Galloway, he was obviously the guy that if you were to look at a lineup, he'd be the guy you choose that WWE would be interested in. So we would prop him up. We would put him on as the posters, and we would all work around him because we knew if he can draw them in and if he can be a success, and then we can all be part of that and we can all build off that and work together. So yeah, you're right, man. Like it's a shame that there's so many individuals out there that are, and quite rightly so. Like it's people are trying to make a living, so it's a bit cutthroat. But I've never been like that, and I don't like working with people like that. And the politics side of it, if you are happy doing that on your own business, then personally I think there's something wrong with you. But like if that's the height of the person, you know what I mean? I'd rather be a good person than a dick.
Exactly. I love it. I often hear whenever I'm asking guys on here about like where they want to travel or where they want to go, it's always the UK or overseas in Europe. Um, who might have been your favorite guy that came over from the States or another country that you got to get in the ring with if you had to pick one?
Favorite? I've loved working with Scotty Too Hotty anytime he's been over. Um, when I came over to the WWE Performance Center for the first time in 2017, he was a coach at the time.
Okay.
And I just remember feeling a kind of good connection with him. He was just nice guy, down to earth, easy to talk to. And when he got let go, I was one of the first guys to message him and say, I've got a place in Scotland that I started in 2020, a pro wrestling gym, and it's like Scotland's only fully equipped strength and conditioning pro wrestling focused gym. If you don't
Nice.
want to be a pro wrestler involved in pro wrestling, you can't come to this gym. Um, we started putting on shows so that our members and our students can get experience of working on in front of an audience. And Scotty was one of the first guys that we had on the shows when we started running them in like 2022. So in recent times, um, he's always been a good guy to work with. I've enjoyed his company and the work and the effort that he puts into entertaining the crowd. Um, yeah, he's just a good guy to have around. Early days, my first big match was with Marty Jannetty,
Ooh,
which in like 2004. So I was
okay.
maybe 16, 17 years old. Um, maybe 17, 18, but I was young and growing up I idolized Shawn Michaels and the Rockers were one of my favorite tag teams growing up. So to be like that close and one person removed from like as I said earlier, there was never a road to the WWE, but getting to work with guys like that who you know have been there and that you can learn from, and if you can hang with them, then you're on the right road. You're doing something right. Um, I was able to work with a bunch of ECW guys like Sabu and Rhino and Super Crazy. Like ICW's gave me a few big matches with them. Um, mostly everybody was. I got to tag with Vader for BCW, and
Okay.
that was something I'll always remember. Like, there's been so honestly, man, I've been doing this 20 to 23 years, and I've been very fortunate to share the ring with a lot of big names. Chavo Guerrero in
Hmm.
BCW, like he's someone that I kind of look up to because he's been able to use his transferable skills as a pro wrestler outside of pro wrestling. And I think any time that a pro wrestler can get a job that isn't, he's still doing what he knows, but it's not a pro wrestler. Anytime you can get something like that, I've got a lot of respect for. Um, So yeah, it was. I was very fortunate to work a lot of these guys. Funny story: the best merchandise that I ever saw from an import. It was an American coming over to BCW again. Was D'Lo Brown had his own bobbleheads, and they would do this. And I thought, if I was a big fan of D'Lo Brown back in the day, and he was so charismatic and so physical in his movement, and I thought that was the best merchandise I'd ever seen. Mick Foley done a lot for us. Like all these names are just coming to us as we work through it, but he came over early days, not long before Drew was getting signed and was working with him. So to be honest, Drew got all the imports. If I've got a bone to pick, it's because we always propped him up and gave him the big stars and made him look good. He always get the big names. He always get the imports. But I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of good people early on and learn a lot from them in the ring.
Usually on the podcast, I try to pick five opponents and then ask you specifically about them guys. But like I was going through your match catalog and I was like, there's just too many. Because like I was Rhinos, I've had like a lot of these guys on the podcast, and I was like, well, I want to ask about Rhino or Sabu or whoever, and I was like, there's just too many, so I'm not asking who his favorite is. So it's cool that you got to work with all those individuals.
Yeah, Rhino was so much fun to work with. He was just an easygoing guy. Again, another guy that I look up to who does this job professionally.
Yes.
He's been and done there everything. Um, Getting to work him during the match, I throw him to the outside. I think the ropes broke during this match. It was in a building, a nightclub called the ABC on Sucky Hall Street in Glasgow, which is sadly burnt down. That was a fantastic wrestling venue. The top rope broke, or the middle rope broke, and we had to brawl on the outside for a bit. So I threw him to the outside and I hit off the rope. And I like to throw myself about. I might be 270 pounds and 6'2", but I can fly when I want to. And I threw myself right over the top rope, hit Rhino, but he was covered in so much oil and like moisturizer. He smelled fantastic, but it was very, very slippery. So I hit him and then slid right off him like a cartoon and hit the concrete floor with my head. And uh, yeah, I was buzzing for a little bit after that, but we got up with the ring got fixed and we get in and finished the match. I think he put Kaylee Ray, Alba Fire, through a table that night, and
Okay.
then I might have been lucky enough to get in knuckle dusters and knock him out. So, and then Sabu was just crazy, like in the
He is.
best way possible.
He really
It
is.
was just such a ball of energy and so the appearance is up here and everything's chaotic and crazy, but in his self, his like zen is just down here, and he's
Hmm.
so level and he's in control of everything he's doing. Um, yeah, just a fantastic opportunity to be able to say I've shared the ring with him, and he delivered. He gave exactly what you'd expect Sabu to do. Backstage, he'd wrestled a match for ICW, not against me. So I was on later on the card, and I'd asked them to watch my match. Um, I might have been during him, but anyway, I do a swanton bomb. As I say, I'm heavily influenced by Jeff Hardy, and I've always done a swanton bomb since I started pro wrestling as one of my big finishers. And I told Sabu this, I'm going to do as a swanton. He says, "No, you're too big." Again, I'm 6'2", 270. You're too big. You shouldn't be doing swantons off the top rope. Leave that for the RVDs and the smaller guys. And I didn't listen to him because I knew it was a good move, it was a good spot, and I did it during the match. And when I came back, I thought he was going to chin me. I thought he was going to give me into trouble. And he said, "That swanton, always do it. Do it every single match. Do it in any scenario you can. If they're in the corner, throw yourself at them. If they're out the ring, throw yourself at them. If you can do that, always do that." He was very impressed with the Swanton, so much so. that he says I should be leaning into it and I should be throwing myself at people. So I think maybe the wild Sabu saw a little bit of himself in me because again, like I grew up in the Jackass era and ECW was just kicking off, and Sabu is someone that I had a lot of respect with, like for love that I was able to share the ring with him. But if you take Sabu from 1998, say, and put him in ICW at any point, I think that would have been just as good, if not better, than what he did in ECW because it was just ICW was birthed from people that loved ECW, and I think Sabu, Rhino, and all these guys, the ECW legends in their heyday, would have thrived with the ICW environment. Not only the show, but the fans and the guys backstage. I think they would all get along very, very well.
You know, something I've always been curious about is like when here I tried to dive into like how you guys feel or what your reaction was, and like you mentioned not you mentioned earlier maybe like not really pushing to get to the WWE. So what was your reaction when you was asked to be a part of the UK tournament?
So, as much as I never really pushed to try and make it to the WWE, maybe through a bit of self doubt, thinking, well, why try? I might not get it. Um, I never had a tryout. I never sent in any footage to the WWE. I was very lucky, right place, right time. 2016, ICW were on tour. They're in Manchester, England, and William Regal is coming to the show because he's scouting. We didn't know, but he's scouting for the tournament. So he watches the show. I was on with Noam Dar, who had already been working for the WWE, had done the Cruiserweight Classic, and was on his way to moving over to America to work with them for full time. So it really helps to have someone that they already know that they can watch you work with. And Noam was that guy for me. And I just beat him up for 15 minutes and I just showed aggression, and something in that was enough for William Regal to decide, right, we're going to offer Wolfgang a spot in this UK tournament. And I'd sent him an email because I didn't get a chance to say goodbye at the Manchester show. So I just thanked him for his time. And if I was ever to get a chance to chat with him again, I'd like to hear his feedback. And um, I got an email from him one morning and he says, "What's your phone number?" So I got very excited that the William Regal from the WWE was wanting my phone number. No idea what it could be. Um, I was forgetting like the time difference in America to the UK, which is like 5 hours on the East
Yeah.
Coast. So I was waiting all day for him to phone me, like by the phone, just let's go. And as time went on, I thought, right, maybe he's just going to give me a back call tomorrow. And I was relaxing late at night, getting ready for bed, and got the phone call, started ringing, and it was a American phone number. So I answered it, and right away I knew it was a very distinctive voice, William Regal, and he says to me, "There's a an offer on the table for you to be part of this first ever WWE United Kingdom Championship tournament." And not only that, I would come to find out that I'm the only guy representing Scotland. Lucky for me, Joe and Mark Coffey were signed to World of Sport, and they were unable to do it. So I had to fly the flag for the entirety of Scotland. Now, remember, like we've already got Noam Dar and Nikki maybe signed by this point, and I think Big Damo, who'd done a lot of work in Scotland, had been signed, and there was a lot of talent coming out of Scotland, and there was a lot of responsibility that I personally felt to showcase Scottish talent. I was privileged enough to be the one chosen, but that was just through sheer luck and the universe pointing me the right way. Like there was so many other people that could have been in that position, so I felt very fortunate to be the only guy from Scotland going into this UK tournament. So yeah, it was the first thing was a press conference in 2016, like November or December. That was the
Hmm.
first press conference when Triple H announced with Regal. They showed I don't know if they showed the title, but they announced the tournament. And yeah, just such an exciting time to be part of that and to be part of that crew who were there to kind of showcase British pro wrestling, like the best kept secret, honestly, in pro wrestling. Um, and for those that were part of it, know how good it was, and for those that missed out, it's a shame that you only get to watch it back and try to relive it because I hope one day we can try and get it back to that again. Just how much of a buzz there was going on in professional wrestling already before the tournament, but the tournament really solidified and gave you that sort of stamp of approval. Like, yeah, we're all doing something right here. We've got World of Sport, which is being recorded for television, like British television, and the WWE are putting on a UK tournament, so we're doing something right. Um, to get the chance to work for the WWE was always in the back of my mind, not something I ever threw myself at, not believing it could ever really happen. So when it came to me and when it fell on my lap, I was very, very happy with it.
How important would you say that tournament was for not only yourself, but maybe the United Kingdom or the UK independent scene?
The UK tournament was very important to me professionally, and pivotal in the success I've had over the last 8 years working with the WWE. However, I can't say that without that, there wouldn't have been something else in Europe kicking off in the UK because honestly, these tickets were like gold dust. It was in Glasgow specifically. ICW was the hottest show in town. It was such a good night out. It was it was over 18s, so you could have a drink, and a lot of these venues didn't have anything on a Sunday night, and they needed something to draw in a crowd. So they were happy to just let us put on a show because they were going to get the bar money. And I think if the WWE hadn't came and ultimately gave a spotlight to a wider worldwide spotlight to what was going on, as I said before, it was the best kept secret. It was undeniable the success that the scene and everyone involved with it were having. So it's hard to say what it would have become if WWE didn't get involved. It certainly helped. Like it's created a lot of stars throughout Scotland, England, Ireland, and Wales, Northern Ireland. So it's for the betterment of the entire British wrestling scene because we've all got that much more experience and we're all willing to pass it on, whether it's through seminars, coaching at my own gym back in Glasgow, or being in the ring working with a lot of these guys who are coming through and hoping to get to where we have been and beyond. So yeah, it's hard to really say how it would have been hadn't WWE get involved because maybe World of Sport would have kept going. Maybe ICW would have got its own television deal or something. Like I like thinking about these what ifs and all these parallel universes and multiverses, but you could sit and play that game all day, I suppose.
Definitely, definitely. What was your reaction when the WWE UK brand was announced?
So I was lucky enough to be part of that first tournament and involved from the ground up.
Hmm.
And I was backstage at all the speeches Triple H was giving about building this brand and creating something new and being the first ones to be there on the ground floor, as he put it. And it was just a one-off to begin with that weekend in Blackpool. There was never a this is going to become a brand. It was just we thought we'll do the tournament, they'll crown the champion, and then they'll maybe use a couple of people from the tournament over in America. So it quickly became a reality that they were going to try and produce regular content with the UK talent who were featured in the tournament. We did Nottingham, like Sheffield, like a bunch of little scattered shows. It wasn't until a year later where we had been doing the odd show here or there to record it for the WWE network, and a handful of us were being taken over to America and featured on NXT, or we did a 205 Live kind of thing. So they were trying to scatter the UK talent from the tournament around the WWE product. And it wasn't until a year later, I think it was 2018, that we did the Royal Albert Hall. It was myself against Adam Cole for the NXT North American Championship. It was the first time that we'd really seen Mark and Joe Coffey. And it was at that show that they announced we were going to have NXT UK was going to be the branding of it. In fact, I was there when they created the crest, the kind of the lion
Yeah.
and the horse with
Yep.
the crest in the middle of it. I was there when they created that. That's how long I've been with them. Like I watched them put that together on the screen. Someone must have said to them that that's the Queen's emblem. You can't use that, so they had to change it.
Okay.
So instead of, if you look at a UK passport, the national animal of Scotland, and you can look this up, is a unicorn. Google that, well, and I'll wait for you. It's on our passports, right? All British passports have a unicorn on it because it's Scotland's national animal. They had to change the crest of the UK brand from a unicorn, so they get rid of the horn.
Oh, I see it.
And I've never told anyone this, right? But when Mark and I, when Gallus won the NXT UK tag titles, it's a beautiful, beautiful title. It's probably my favourite that the WWE's ever shown, is the NXT UK Tag Team Championship, and I was lucky enough that I've got a replica of it in the gym. But the first thing I did was, they've got the crest with a horse and the lion in the NXT UK. The first thing I did was get a little marker and I scratched a horn into the horse to make it a unicorn. So the entire time that I was walking around with that NXT UK Tag Team Championship, I made sure it was a unicorn that was on it, because I was that petty. Because I wanted Scotland's national animal to be on it. I didn't want that just to be scrubbed out for the sake of your design. Like, that unicorn that meant something to me, and I carried that with me on the championship. You might be able to go back and zoom in. I think I've got a photo of it somewhere, but yeah,
That's badass. It's a cool little nitpick like story that's cool. Thank you for sharing
yeah.
that. Uh,
They painted over it as soon as I was gone. Like, as soon as the belt went to someone else, they repainted it. The guys that
okay.
looked after the titles knew that's one thing that I would do to them, so that they weren't fussed with it at all. But yeah, it was just a little bit. It didn't mean anything to anyone other than myself. So it's a little thing like that I can remember.
I got two more questions for you, and then I'll let you go. Another thing like about doing research, and it's been very apparent on social media. Yourself, Joe, and Mark, you guys got to help The Rock train for WrestleMania for his match against Cody. and Seth. Like, how did that come about? Did The Rock hand pick you guys? Like, what went into that whole ordeal heading into WrestleMania?
So getting the chance to train with The Rock and prepare him for WrestleMania 40 was just three guys from Glasgow. Never imagined they're going to be afforded that opportunity and given that responsibility. Because let's be honest, if you send the wrong guys and something happens to The Rock and he doesn't make it to WrestleMania, that's on them. So it was a lot of responsibility and something that we carried with pride. We understood the assignment, get The Rock ready for the biggest WrestleMania in history, get the biggest star in the world ready for the biggest show in the world. So there was a lot of responsibility and nothing that we kind of took lightly. We treated ourselves, we conducted ourselves as professionals and done the job to the highest standard. Um, it came about from a text from our head coach, Matt Bloom, who most people know as Prince Albert or A Train or Lord Tensai. Um, he sent us a text message saying, "Pack a bag, you're flying to LA to train The Rock for WrestleMania." And that just it almost felt like an April Fool's. Do you get that over here?
Yeah,
Like the first day of April, you can take the piss out of someone. So he likes a good laugh. Like he likes a wind up, and we didn't take him seriously. We thought he was joking, but no. Sure enough, he says you're going to hear from travel later on today, and you'll be flying out to LA to help The Rock get ready for WrestleMania. So, like, again, it was a kind of stamp of approval. It was like, these are the guys that we trust to go and look after him and give them what they need, kind of thing. Um, we flew out there, landed on like the Monday afternoon. We were supposed to be training with them on the Tuesday, but they couldn't make it. And we ended up getting a free day. And a free day in wrestling's a little treat. You rarely get a day off. So we went to the gym, got some lunch, and then we drove around LA like three tourists for a day and got to see all the sights. The boys had never been. I'd been over there once or twice, so I was basically just driving them around like one of those bus tours, going, and this is where the thing is, and this is where the Rainbow Rooms is, and here's Santa Monica Pier. So that was a good day, but then the next day, I think it was the Wednesday, we got straight to business. We were there at the warehouse in the middle of nowhere on the back streets of LA somewhere. And the WWE had set up a wrestling ring and put a bunch of mats down. And we got there a little bit early. The Rock's bodyguard showed up first to scope the place out and make sure we were kosher. And then The Rock showed up with all the producers and a referee, and like the full team were there, all just to get The Rock ready for this match at WrestleMania. Um, it was a great experience. He was super humble, down to earth. Like, had a joke with us. The first day he spent with us, he was getting to know us. It was all business. It was all let's. We were there to play the parts of the other people in the match. So Mark and Joe were Seth and Cody, and I was playing the part of Roman Reigns. And they had an idea of what they wanted to do for the match, and we were there to kind of fill in our parts when in their absence. Um, so there wasn't really an opportunity to really. You think if you're going to get to spend time with The Rock, you're going to want to pick his brains and try and learn from him. And we did get to learn from him, and just by watching him and working with them. But what I mean is, like, we wouldn't do the parts that weren't involving him because there was no point. So everything was geared towards getting him ready for what he had to do. The second day, he was a lot more relaxed. He showed up with his camera crew, because he thought this is a good thing. We're going to want to document this. So his $7 production team came with all the cameras and they filmed the whole thing. And I hope we get to see that footage one day because I think we've got a photo with him at the side of the ring. But it was one of those things that if I didn't have a photo, you wouldn't believe it had happened. You know what I mean? It's a
Yeah,
hard story to tell without being able to go, look, I'm telling the truth. Three guys from Glasgow who started training in the middle of like nowhere with no aspirations of making it to the WWE, but no real road to get there. Fast forward for me, the best part of 20 years, and everything you've done has led up to this point where you've got that validation of you are the guy responsible for getting The Rock ready for WrestleMania, along with your Gallus brothers. It was a huge honor professionally, and personally, it's something that I think will be hard to beat for the rest. For everything else I do in professional wrestling is going to be it was a really big moment for us.
definitely. I think the big question now is what's next for Wolfgang after departing WWE.
So since leaving WWE, I have been unable to pursue work in America simply because the visa that we were here on was attached to the job. So unfortunately, there's a time limit from when the job expires that the visa also expires. So we'll be working with a team trying to secure our own working visas so that we can continue to pursue work here with one of the bigger companies, or I'd love to try and get involved with a lot of the independent promotions around here in Florida and beyond. There's so much good wrestling out there. Mark, Joe, and myself feel as though we've been kept in the sidelines a lot and we've been at the mercy of other people when it comes to getting to wrestle. There's some people in this company, well, that company, that don't want to work the local shows and they don't want to work anywhere else. I'm a main event guy, and if I can't wrestle there, I'm not wrestling. Whereas I love professional wrestling, Mark and Joe love professional wrestling, and we feel most alive and accomplished when we're in a professional wrestling ring doing the job. And that's what we want to get back to. We want to be wrestling every weekend, everywhere against all the opponents. We just want to be involved as much as we can now. After you says you had a look at my opponents, if you look at that over the last 2 years, it's nowhere near as many matches as I would like to have had. My the best man at my wedding, one of my best mates in wrestling, he's been a friend of mine since school. He's the busiest wrestler in the entire world right now. He wrestles pretty much 8 days a week. And if you go, do you go on Cage Match website? I use that for stats.
Yeah,
You go on Cage Match and you find the stat for the most matches this year so far. You'll see a name, BT Gun, and another guy that I look up to because he's just an absolute grafter and he's the epitome of a pro wrestler. He's one of the best in ring. He's carries himself professionally, and he's a leader backstage and a testament to any locker room that would have him. So the comparison of watching my best mate wrestle so often and literally be the busiest wrestler in the world to then be sitting on the sidelines and only getting an opportunity because you're trying to ask for it and you're putting yourself forward for it. We're looking forward to just being wrestlers again. And the first time we get to do that so far has been confirmed as Gallus returning to Glasgow for Clan Wrestling, who are associated with the Clan hockey football, the Clan hockey team, the local ice hockey team. Incidentally, we're going to a building called Braehead Arena, which is the same building or the same ice rink that I proposed to my wife, Molly Spartan, on. And NXT has been NXT UK went there in 2000 and maybe 18, 19. And since then, the WWE have been in Glasgow a few times for some big shows. And whether it's Clash at the Castle or Monday Night Raw, Gallus had to sit and watch the biggest wrestling promotion, who we are contracted to and we work for, run a mega show in our hometown, and we weren't involved. And that just doesn't sit right with us at all, however you want to spin it. So we're excited to be coming home. We're excited to be involved with clan wrestling, but we're most excited just to get in the ring and be pro wrestlers again.
Definitely, definitely. Wolfgang, I just want to say thank you. This was an absolute honor. Had a great time, and I can't wait to do another one. I got plenty more questions to ask. I'd love to have you on for part two.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to do a part two with you. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm sorry I'm a bit long-winded and I can get passionate about what I'm saying sometimes, but
No, I
as the
love it.
podcast says, I love pro wrestling. So I could talk about pro wrestling forever.
Absolutely. Um, Man, before we go, do you want to just let the fans know if they don't already know where they can catch you on social medias just for them updates?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite active on Instagram, Wolfgang Young underscore. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. In fact, I came up with this move, or at least I think I came up with this move called the Paradise Windfall, and that seems to be doing good numbers on Facebook. So go check that out. Wolfgang Young on Facebook. I've just started a big cartel, and we'll be putting out like one of a kind items on there. Again, Wolfgang at Big Cartel. So, but if you want to see what I'm up to on a daily basis and what I'm going to be doing coming up, Instagram's the place to be. I've had a few requests recently for like birthday shout outs and wedding sort of ceremony congratulatory messages. So if you want to book me on Cameo, I'm also on Cameo with Wolfgang. But yeah, if you want to follow me and get involved and support me, then Wolfgang Young underscore on Instagram. I'll see you there.
Perfect. I will leave this at see you next time.
See you again, pal. Thank you very much.